Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Today is probably going to be a shorter presentation, but I did want to talk about the tree farm system because uh, many woodland owners hear about it and they're asked if they would like to join it, and they just don't know what it is or what the benefits are. So I did want to include it on one of our lunch and learns, but like I said, it there's information, but just not probably 45 minutes worth of information. So this is probably a shorter presentation today. Just a quick overview if you're joining us for the first time today. What is Women Owning Woodland? This is our program being developed to provide learning opportunities to women landowners and woodland enthusiasts. Through extension, we organize field days, lunch and learns, classes that are geared toward women forest landowners and woodland enthusiasts. A Facebook page that can provide either networking opportunities or just information. Again, I try to post about things that are happening around the state that might be of interest to woodland owners and to people that are just excited to be outdoors and in the woods. Some upcoming events. So we started last week with the Summer Woodland Steward webinar series, but registration is still open and we have been recording those. So if anyone signs up between now and the 31st, they'll just be given those recordings and let them know that they're welcome to ask Hank or I questions about any of the topics. So last week we covered, we called it Under the Big Top, and we covered a lot of trees that are in the understory. Tomorrow night is about doing masked surveys for wildlife, and then our last one will be all about cost share. We also still have a few spots left if you're in the Kirksville area or want to take a drive to the Kirksville area for our Women Owning Woodland, Women Caring for the Land Field Days. Those are done in conjunction with Pheasants Forever, Quail Forever, and Missouri Department of Conservation. And then we have one more August lunch and learn after today, that on the 30th. And that one will be covering our plant diagnostics lab and our soils lab, how to submit samples and sort of information that you can get from those labs. So without further ado, let's talk about the tree farm system. So some quick history. This is kind of an ugly slide, but it includes a lot of the information that started. And a lot of our tree farm history or tree farm system was started in response to forest diseases and forest fires. And we were really interested in how we could protect forests from these two things. So in 1941, there was a tract of land that Weyerhaeuser Timber Company had set aside, and they had put this aside just so that they could experiment with forest fire prevention and with insect prevention. And then in 1941, that tract was dedicated as the first official tree farm. And so the tree farm system, it did kind of bounce around for a while, but it initially started under the National Lumber Manufacturers Association and then was tucked under a subsidiary called the American Forest Product Industries. And they are the folks that kind of oversaw the program in its infancy. This tract of land by Weyerhaeuser, it was named for a local logger, Charles H. Clemens. So it became known as the Clemens Tree Farm. And that was the first in succession of forest lands that were certified for growing trees as crop and practicing forest management on a sustainable basis. So this was the, again, very, very first tree farm and kind of the beginning of this program that we have in place. In 1946, AFPI became an independent organization, so it left the National Hardwood Association and became its own program, and it retained oversight of the tree farm program. And then over the next 70 years, the American Tree Farm System kind of jumped from organization to organization until landing where it is presently with the American Forest Foundation, or AFF. So again, it was under the American Forest Institute, the American Forest Council, and then again, now it's under the American Forest Foundation. So I should say this is the national tree farm system. So it is active in 42 states in the US. And then each state, and I'm going to get into this a little bit later, but each state also has their own kind of oversight system that helps, again, landowners have local resources for this. So again, this was established in response to two threats, which is forest fires, and then also government regulation. I should have put that in there too as well. Government regulation of private forest lands. So for a really long time, forest land was given a really high tax rate. And so owners had a very little incentive to hold on to land and reforest them after they logged it. So what we found was that a lot of woodland owners would buy property, wooded property, and then they would log it all off, sell everything, and then because of the high tax rate, they would often just walk away and default on the taxes and allow the government to take that property back, and then resell it at tax sales. And so this led to a lot of really poor practices for long-term forest management. As you can imagine, if you log everything off and then just leave it to do what it's going to do, you're not going to have a really healthy forest for a long time. So this, again, needed to be reversed if we wanted to have kind of this long-term, and this is one of the reasons that the American tree farm system fell under kind of with the logging system and under our hardwood associations, is because they really had a lot of skin in the game. They really wanted to make sure that we had forests for the future to maintain our timber industry. And so again, that's kind of historically how it started. So after a lot of struggle and kind of retrenchment, the 1990s, the American tree farm system emerged as a truly national program with universally accepted national codes and standards. So this is when it became a more straight path to becoming considered an American tree farm and being put into that American tree farm system. And that's when AFF, so American Forest Foundation, took over. And then today, this ATFS certification, it is recognized as an international standard. So it's not just something that means anything, just in the US. It also is recognized internationally by forest management agencies. And then in the early, so as you can see, Weyerhaeuser is a corporation, and they were the first tree farm. But in the early 2000s, they decided to focus exclusively on family forest owners. So we moved a little bit more away from a tree farm being considered as much by industry and more onto private forest owners. So the tree farm system had their 70th anniversary in 2011. And at that time, there were 88,000 family forest owners that were practicing sustainable management on 26 million acres of forest land. So that's where we are today. So it's kind of the evolution of the American tree farm system. So you might see this is kind of the evolution of those tree farm signs over the years. So how do you become a tree farm or a tree farmer? So there's 5 steps for tree farm certification. So the first one is that you have to own 10 to 10,000 acres of woodland. And then all certified family forest owners have to have a management plan that addresses air, water, soil quality, wildlife, special sites, invasive species, and integrated pest management. There is a link to the ATF standards of sustainability. Here in Missouri, if you have worked with a private consulting forester or with the Missouri Department of Conservation forester or with an NRCS forester to develop a management plan for your property, it certainly meets the ATFS standards of sustainability. And it's very likely that those foresters have probably encouraged or mentioned the tree farm system to you, because it is, again, a really, it doesn't always seem important to individual owners, but having this kind of group of forest owners, private forest owners, provides a lot of I won't say clout, but it provides a lot of backing at the national level. So AFF has lots of, I shouldn't say lots, but they have folks that are in Washington, D.C. that help really advocate for forest landowners and for, money to help with management on private lands. And so that's one of the important reasons for having this tree farm system in place. Third step is to request a property inspection with one of the American Tree Farm System trained inspecting foresters. And so most of our trained inspecting foresters are going to be MDC foresters, private consulting foresters, or an NRCS forester. So most of them have been trained to certify and inspect tree farms. Then after you've requested that inspection, the inspector will visit your property and verify that your land management activities meet those standards of sustainability. So again, as long as you've had a plan put in place by kind of one of those three listed, you can also, there's a website called mylandplan.org, which can actually help you kind of start building your own management plan if you have no interest in working with an NRCS or MDC or private consulting forester. It's a little bit trickier to kind of get everything signed. You can still request that inspection and kind of base it on that plan that you've put together. I will say that it's a lot easier to use, one of our forester resources that are available to us. And then after all that has met, the last step is to post your American Tree Farm System sign with pride. So it's a green and white sign that recognizes your property as a tree farm. And most of our landowners display this, along the driveway or along the main road into the property. And it is usually kind of a sense of pride and a sense of accomplishment once you have that sign. I will also say that some of this, for tax purposes, being designated as a tree farm can also help with some taxes depending upon which county and which state you're in. I've had several landowners that have gone through getting management plans and putting together getting their certification to help, with the tax side of things as well. The Missouri Tree Farm System. So again, this is based on all these national tree farm policies, but you think locally. So a lot of individuals, when they see that, they think of short-term agricultural plant and harvest scenarios or Christmas tree plantations, because that's the closest thing in tree farming that we have kind of to an short-term agricultural crop and harvest. But our tree farms, they can be plantations such as Christmas tree farms. They can also be planted walnut, pecan, pine, oak, or any other tree species. But they also are native forests and woodlands. So anything that falls under that can be designated as a tree farm in the Missouri Tree Farm System. The key is that they're farms or land that has trees on it. And those trees are, forest or woodlands are actively managed for woods, wildlife, water, and or recreation. So you can't, the biggest thing is you can't just have a wild piece of property that you're not thinking about, like what's good for forest health, what's good for wildlife, water resources, soil resources. You need to have a plan in place that is going to, and in some of those plans, it does say just let it grow and that's the plan. But they want to know that you are thinking about overall health and management for the future. And that's really what the tree farm system was put in place for as well. The overseer of our Missouri Tree Farm System is the Forest and Woodland Association of Missouri. So they're kind of our checks and balances. So the Missouri Tree Farm Board is under the Forest and Woodland Association of Missouri. And again, they just kind of oversee that people get their tree farm signs, that we have certified foresters that are able to do the inspections, and then Missouri Department of Conservation foresters and many of our consulting foresters have been through the training and they're able to inspect and certify a property as a tree farm. So again, in many cases, when you have a plan written by an MDC forester, I should put NRCS, we just don't have as many NRCS foresters as we do MDC foresters. So and they'll encourage just the same. And many of them are also certified inspectors. And so that's who you would contact for that inspection. The benefits of being part of the American Tree Farm System. So first one's tools. So there's webinars that are for woodland owners, there's forestry resources, and then forest policy priorities. So this kind of goes back to that, by being part of this tree farm system, AFF has kind of, proof of here's our landowners, these are what they're doing. They're very interested in prioritizing forest resources and forest management, and they can take this again kind of to Washington and provide that proof. And this is what really helps drive things like extra funding for forest management when it comes to federal funds that we receive at the state level. Another one is recognition. So it provides recognition and validation of good forest stewardship. So having that sign is kind of a symbol to your neighbors and people who drive by that, this is a place that is providing or who is conducting good forest management on their property. And then future. So the American Tree Farm System really puts an emphasis on thinking long-term and providing a forest legacy for future generations. See, some of our tree farms have been certified tree farms for quite some time, and some of those have actually gone from one generation to the next. And then sustainability certification. So if as we move towards things like carbon credits and sustainable forestry initiative certification, this provides more value for the trees that we're growing. So sustainable forestry initiative is a initiative, and you might, especially this time of year when we're shopping for school supplies, if you look at notebooks and paper, they sometimes have, I think I have one right here on my desk. Maybe not, that one does not have it. But if you look at some of the notebooks that are, for sale this time of year, or loose leaf paper, it has like a little kind of logo on it that says Sustainable Forestry Initiative, SFI certified. And this means that the wood used for that paper was sustainably grown. So it was grown in a process where, there's an emphasis on forest health and an emphasis on good sustainable practices. And so being part of the American Tree Farm System, this makes your forest qualified. So if you were to have it logged in the future, this would be of importance, and they could pay you top dollar because that wood could be considered SFI wood. And then as it makes its way through the system, it can maintain that SFI certification, which again provides more value to you as the landowner. So they're going to be worth more because of having that certification. But also just kind of that general, this means we have good practices. And this is important to a lot of consumers to know that what they're consuming has been sustainably grown and we have proof of it. So I talked about that sign. So this is what that tree farm sign looks like. So everyone's provided one of these. I will say that your tree farm has to be inspected on a regular basis. And by regular, I mean, I think it's every 5 to 10 years it gets re-inspected. And just to kind of make sure that you're maintaining good practices and you are working through the management plan put in place. If you're interested in learning more about the Missouri Tree Farm System or being part of it, or maybe you already are a Missouri Tree Farm, there is a Missouri Tree Farm Conference that's held annually. This year's is being held September 23rd through the 24th in Ava. And this usually, so last year was kind of a weird, kind of an off year because of COVID, but this year they're kind of going back to back to how it was. And so this year's Missouri Tree Farmers of the Year are from Douglas County. So they're near Ava. So they'll be holding the Tree Farm Conference down in Ava so that a tour can be taken of this year's Missouri Tree Farmers or Emerson's down that way. So there'll be a tour of their property this year. So again, if you're interested, things that are covered are, I know Dr. Stelzer, which is my educational director here at Extension, he's going to talk about carbon credits. MDC foresters are going to talk about invasive species. There's going to be a discussion about the price of timber and what gives trees value. Again, tours of the property. So that's kind of what all that's covered. So it's usually just topics of interest to forest landowners who are part of the tree farm system. But of course, anybody's welcome to join. And then this is for the National Tree Farm System, but they do put out, I want to say, a quarterly email newsletter that you can sign up for. And it gives just interesting resources that are always of interest to forest landowners. New things that are coming out. Like I said, My Land Plan is one of their kind of latest tools that they're providing for landowners. And this is a tool you can map out your property. You can divide it into stands. You can, write down what you have planned for parts of the property. So it's kind of like building your own management plan. So if you have an interest in that, if you maybe don't want to reach out to an MDC forester or a private forester or even the NRCS foresters, you can kind of work through this system your own. They also just send out lots of things like what's coming out, what's the latest coming out of Washington. So, there's been quite a bit of funding that's been put in place for forest management under the current administration. So, and this has mostly come about. So we're very lucky in the Midwest that we don't have a lot of forest fires to deal with. However, the intensity of the forest and the occurrences of forest fires out west have really brought, a lot of interest in forest management overall, which has been, good for us as far as getting more funding to provide more funding for forest management, for private and for public forest management. So like I said, this one was kind of a short one. If there's any questions today, I'm happy to answer. I tried to get, I won't be able to think of her last name now that I'm on video. But we have a director of the Forest and Woodland Association of Missouri. Laura is her first name. I tried to get her on here to talk today, but it just didn't work out schedule wise. But she so underneath the umbrella of FWAM, Forest and Woodland Association of Missouri, we have our tree farm system. We also have forest keepers. I don't know if anyone's a part of that group. So that's an annual training that trains kind of citizen scientists to recognize forest health threats. So tree diseases, tree insects, and then report those. So this kind of keeps us from being surprised by anything getting out of control. So that's underneath FWAM. And they also do the Forestry Summit, which was just a couple, 2 weeks ago. We had that. So it's just kind of a general overall group that oversees a lot of our citizen forestry work. Any questions today? So we really think of being part of the tree farm system as kind of the gold standard of forest management. So, and I know that, people have seen those signs, like a neighbor might have a tree farm sign or, just, passing one in rural Missouri and you're always like, what does that mean? So it's just, again, a sign that says this property, they, have a management plan and they're going to, put that to work in with good forest management practices. So I also should put in that there is a there is a fee to be a tree farm, part of the tree farm system. So full disclosure that they do have a fee for that. And this goes to kind of pay their foresters that work at the American Forest Foundation, and also to keep their people that are there in Washington advocating for landowners. Nikki, have you seen the links for so usually when I send the reminder, I send links to past recordings. Have you been able to see? So 2 are on YouTube, and then last week's, for whatever reason, it recorded to like a different part of my computer. So I gave you guys the Panopto link. Okay, let me make sure that did you get a reminder today?
Yes, I got one.
Okay, because it had the 3 links. Okay, so it should be at the bottom of those emails. They should be for so I included mast, mushroom logs, and herbicide. Oh, Karen, that Zoom is tricky with updating. Oh, good. I'm glad you see them. Yep. See, I just have been adding them to each reminder. And then I did open, so I had been, if you hadn't noticed, I had been keeping the YouTube ones. You had to have the link to connect to them. But I recently just decided I'd make them completely public access. So you should be able to also find them a little bit easier. If you don't have the direct link, you can look at my channel. Oh, yep, absolutely, Patty. Like non-commercial tree farms can definitely, like that's really who they encourage. And you don't even have to, have an interest in even logging it. What they're really just concerned about is maintaining forest health, soil quality, air quality, all the things associated with good, healthy forests. So, and even in Missouri, we have quite a history of, there's lots of historical pictures of the Ozarks where we, kind of clear cut most of southern Missouri. So even here in Missouri, we're a little bit guilty of, or a lot guilty of, clearing the trees and maybe not going back and doing such a great job of replacing what we harvested. But this was put in place. And again, if you notice the date, it was kind of close to of similar time when we had the Dust Bowl, which is also an NRCS, came into existence for soil and water conservation. So kind of all around the same time, we decided how important our resources were to us.
I have a comment on forest keepers. It's pretty cool. They actually had a seminar last year in the fall about everything about trees, and it was really interesting. It was like 4 to 6 weeks long in the evening for 2 hours, so it was kind of grueling at night, but it was really good. And they do have the surveys where you measure the trees, and with the Biltmore stick and everything. So it's kind of nice citizen science, just so everybody knows.
Yes, and they have the training, but then, and you can join anytime, and they'll send you some like, I'll put this in the chat. They'll send you like a kind of, it was on my desk for a while, some reporting forms, but also like how to identify certain forest pests and what to look for. So yes, thanks, Marcia. That's a good reminder of the program. And then they do usually meet after all that. I think last year they met at Pioneer Forest and they took a tour and talked about some of the things they learned in the class. Oh, and Patty, yes, that's good. You'll have to go back and see your management plan, and then if they can certify you if you're interested. Oh, and Karen, yes, yeah, the mass surveys are also very, very useful for them. I'm interested to see the results from this year because I don't think any of my oak trees have any acorns on them. So I'm curious to see how everybody else's oak trees are doing. Any other questions today? Okay, we have one more August session. So next week will be Monday at noon again. And I'm going to cover again about the labs that we have at Missouri. So different resources that we have. One's the plant diagnostics lab, and this one you can, it is good for trees, it's good for plants, so it's good for both of those things. So valuable to us in the forestry realm. And then we'll talk about the soils lab. So how to take a soil sample, why you might want to take a soil sample, where you would want to take it. And then I've also included, I didn't mention at the beginning, but we also have a water analysis lab that's available through Extension. And this one is not used quite as often as the other two, but if you have pond that you're interested in knowing more about, that's also available to landowners to utilize. So, and all of those have a lot of use as far as mystery diseases for plants. Not sure why something is not doing well in a certain area. Those soil surveys certainly can help. And then again, the water quality can also help if you're thinking about fish in a pond. Sending that water in can get some good answers. All right. Well, I hope everyone is staying cool during this hot weather and sent the kids off to school. See, mine started back to school today. So always a good day in the Havens house. All right. Have a great day.